Okay, welcome to another video for non-musicians. If you are already versed in the ways of the digital audio workstation, please feel free to stop watching. Otherwise, this will be very boring for you, I'm sure. What I wanted to cover today is a concept that is a little bit more subtle, and it helps to see it in action. And that is the idea of separating data from the actual sound when it comes to a musical part. So on my screen right now, I have two parts to this song, and it's going to be a song that everybody's going to recognize, I'm sure, at least if you're, I guess if you're under 50 or under 40, you should recognize it. But even so, I think it's pretty recognizable. So we'll see. Let me know in the comments. We've got two parts here. We've got a melodic part on the top, which is more busy, and then we have a bass line on the bottom that complements that melodic section on the top. And the melodic section on the top is also including some chording there. So we can think of this, for all intents and purposes, think of this as melody and think of this as our bass line. We could just as easily have additional layers here of drums, other things happening, but right now I wanted to keep this simple with two things. Right now, we're just going to see that this is data, and what this is showing us, this is MIDI data, and this is showing us the on and off of certain notes on the keyboard. So we can see here, each one of these is represented as a note that's on, and if there's not a block here, we're not playing that note. So what we call this here, and one term for this, is the performance information. This is what was performed, and that could have been physically performed on a keyboard, or it could have been entered with a mouse or some other method. But for all intents and purposes, this is the performance of the song. By itself, though, this performance of both this melody part and this bass line are completely separate from the sound itself that we're going to use, because using MIDI we have the option of pointing this data to pretty much any sound that we can get our hands on. So right now, if I play this and I hit play in my sequencer, we're not going to hear anything. There's nothing for us to hear. Basically, the program is saying, okay, I'll run through this performance information, but I don't have any sound generator for me to play it through. And this will just loop forever and we'll never hear anything. So what we've got to do is we've got to assign a sound to this performance data. And what I did was I got that ready ahead of time here. I've got a bell piano type sound. And let's just listen to the top of this here. Okay, so it's our good old Mario Brothers theme. I'm putting this tone, or this bell tone, for that part. I'm going to go down here to my bass. I'm going to turn on my sound maker for that bass. And we'll listen to both of these. Okay, so we can see I assigned the performance data to a sound, and that is playing the way that I expect it to based on the sounds I selected. Now, the power of MIDI, one of the powers of MIDI, is that if I don't like what I just did, I can easily change my sounds. So maybe I want to take a different sound approach to the top part here. I'm going to make that a kalimba. And down here on the bass, I'm going to pick a completely different bass sound. Now, I have no idea what this is going to sound like. It might sound really bad, but we'll see. Oh boy. So definitely different. Okay, so we could see very different. We could see that the way that the patch here, the sound patch that we're using, this pencil pusher bass sound, is constructed a lot differently, and it reacts a lot differently to the notes that are being played. And that's one thing that one has to look for when they're auditioning sounds for things like this. Even if I play this in, if I play this in listening to one sound, and then I change that sound, the performance may not work with the other sound because of the way it's programmed. Various, the attack and the decay of the notes within the patch may not be as good as we had with our first sound. So that's a part of where the human interaction with things comes in, auditioning things. In the next clip, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the next step of rendering this as actual audio. Right now, this is still MIDI data. It's playing it through some sound devices, but we still don't have any actual digital audio wave files or anything that we can see or work with. So that'll be the next step. Okay, to save time, I went and rendered this off camera, but I want to start with just reviewing. Here's our MIDI that we were playing with earlier. We're going to mute that. We're not going to listen to that at all now. That's going to be turned off. And here are the audio renders of those parts. And I actually went back to the bell sound and punchy bass of our first example. So now what we're looking at is actually digital audio. And this performance will sound pretty much the same as what we had before. Okay, but the key difference is now we're locked in. We're locked into these sounds. There's not anything I can really do to change this sound fundamentally to something else unless I use effects processing. So yeah, I might want to add some reverb or add some EQ or do some other processing on this sound. But in terms of the core sound itself, I'm stuck with that bell at this point. Okay, so then the next step, if we were creating something to release or put out there in the world, is that we've got to go from this type of a setup where we have multiple tracks of different instruments, different sounds, and we've got to mix them together. So the next phase of this is a mixing phase, and that entails a lot of different things, dealing with levels of the different instruments, where they're at in the stereo field. So just for example, as I play this piano part here, we can change where that goes, left or right. You may or may not hear that if this is going to mono on the recording. You may not actually hear that. But on the meter, we could see there it's changing the direction of where that's going. So mixing involves a lot of decision making. After all the recording is done, you might be mixing as you go, but at some point when all the recording is finished, there is a step in the process where you're discerning where things are going to go. Okay, you're listening and you're saying, well, that bass is taking up a lot of space. I need to move that back in the mix a little bit. You're looking at left-right placement. You're looking at forward-backward placement. And there's a lot of decisions there that are made based on just a person's taste, and different producers have different ideas of how they want things to sound. So the next step we're going to look at is, after we've got all that mixing stuff done, another step after this where we combine everything into one file. Okay, now we're at the next step where I've exported that performance of the piano and bass line into a stereo mix. And this is now all mushed together. and we'll hear everything together. In this case, I'm not doing anything fancy with panning or anything, so we're just going to hear a very balanced stereo mix. Okay, and just as before, when we switched from our MIDI file to our audio file, we rendered that audio file for the piano and the bass line. That was one step closer to the point of no return. This is even further down the line of what we have here is what we have. If we don't like what we have, we're going to have to go back to the other project and re-render, readjust levels. Like if I thought the bass was too loud here, I have some choices I can make. I can approach that with maybe an EQ or some other processing, but ideally I don't want to have to touch anything. If I have access to the original file, I might go back to the original file and remix it there and try to get it correct. And that's where the term "fix it in the mix" kind of comes in. You obviously want to try to not have to fix anything in the mix. You want to record it properly to begin with, but there's always going to be something that you got to tweak a little bit. But certainly by this stage, you don't necessarily want to do a lot of additional things because you can start damaging the audio. What you do want to look at is, in relation to other tracks on a collection of songs, what are my levels like? What are my overall levels like? And just real quick, what we're looking at here is we're looking at amplitude on the top here, and on the bottom we're looking at frequency response. So we can see from right here, this little, if we go to a place at the beginning, and we see these real hot parts down the bottom, that's the bass line. We can see that's a real low frequency happening. And we can see the little melodic sections up here, the sustained high notes, or these small bands here. And if we expand this, we could get some pretty good detail in here. But no matter what I do, everything is smushed together. That's my technical term for today. And we might apply, maybe there's, like, this is just the beginning of the song. Maybe I want that to end abruptly, or maybe I want to put a fade in here if I'm using this as a training thing. And I'm introducing my video. Hey, we're going to talk about Mario Brothers today. Come back in a couple moments. Okay, now it's going to fade out for effect, and I'm fading all of the instruments together. And I just saved that but didn't want to, but I can always undo. So that's a quick look at the various steps in this process. And I will put a link to my article about making pizza, because this relates to making pizza. And I would like to possibly do another video with pizza at some point. But I wanted to focus on the music at this point. So thanks for watching.